Welcome to the Reasonable Christianity Podcast, a weekly podcast where you get to discover the truth claims, teachings, and practices of Christianity. Here's your host, Roland. Hi, my name is Roland with Reasonable Christianity, and welcome to the very first episode of the Reasonable Christianity Podcast. I'm super excited to be with you guys, and the purpose of the podcast is basically just where we can consider the truth claims, teachings, and practices of Christianity more thoroughly. With that being said, I don't consider myself to be an expert in, anything. So this podcast is more of an invitation rather than a teaching platform. There are many aspects of reality that I'm interested in or that I think are crucial for human flourishing. So the goal of this podcast is to share my journey with you and invite you along for the ride. As a Christian for more than a decade, there are a lot of things that I'm concerned about. Particularly, I'm very concerned about the fact that many Christians that I speak to don't really know what we believe as Christians. And they're even more concerning, they don't know why we believe what we believe. So it's my hope that I can make some small contribution in equipping the saints for ministry so that we can be more effective in the world today. Okay, so if you know me, you know that I actually do have a YouTube channel. So someone might ask, why start a podcast? And the reason for the podcast is because the platform gives us more opportunity to grow or to develop a more intimate relationship with an audience. It gives me the opportunity to actually spend more time in discussing or presenting a topic. On YouTube, people like to watch a video maybe for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. So it doesn't give me the opportunity to actually go through all the relevant details when discussing a topic. And sometimes even when I'm presenting a topic, I have questions which I want to delve into, which I want to consider, which I want to equip myself in. And I don't really have the opportunity on YouTube. Maybe the podcast would give me a platform on YouTube as well to do the same. But I'm not concerned about that at the moment. I just want a platform where we can journey together, where we can share our relationship with God, the questions we have, the struggles we have, and hopefully find answers to those questions together. Okay, now this is going to be the first episode, and so I want us to get a kind of overview of what the rest of the season is going to be about in terms of this podcast. So the first season, what I want to do is I want to answer or consider some fundamental questions about the nature of reality, the nature of God, the nature of what it means to be a Christian. So I'm going to give you guys an overview of the topics that we're going to consider in the first season. The first topic is, what is truth? Now, this is probably the most important thing we can talk about now. There are important topics like what does a person need to do to be saved, or what does a person need to believe to be saved, or the nature of salvation. We can discuss the person of Christ and all these things, and we're going to go through them. But if we don't have a foundation of what truth is, none of the other things will make sense and none of the other things will matter. We live in a society today where people live as though all truth is relative truth. What do I mean by that? We live in a society where people have this saying of, you have your truth, I have my truth. We are constantly being encouraged to live our truth, as if truth is something that belongs to the person or that is defined by the person. If that is the case, if there is no objective truth, if there is no truth that applies to all of us, then Christianity can't be true. And it doesn't matter. If every truth is just subjective, if it's just a matter of opinion, then it doesn't matter. Then you have your opinion, I have my opinion, and there's no way to adjudicate between the two of us. So we need to first start by defining truth. We also need to take a look at the difference between a truth claim and an actually established truth. Because a truth claim is just a claim you make about reality. You still need to present evidence to prove your claim. Okay? And along with that, we're going to discuss a couple of other things, like, for example, what is the burden of truth or the burden of proof when we consider evidence? So if I have to ask the question, does God exist? How much evidence do I have to present to someone in order for that person to go, okay, you've met the burden of proof and I've been officially convinced? So you need to look at burden of proof, because there are many atheists today, many scientific atheists today, that would claim that there's no evidence for the existence of God. And when they say that, what they actually mean is there's no evidence that meets their criteria of what evidence is for the existence of God, because there's plenty of evidence. And so the question needs to be asked as well, when we consider something like the existence of God, is the scientific method the way that we would go about to prove the existence of God? Can we, for example, if something happened in the past, like the resurrection, how would you go about to prove that the resurrection actually happened? Would you go into a lab and perform experiments to prove it? No, you wouldn't. There would be a different methodology that you would follow in order to prove if an event in the past happened. For example, apartheid in South Africa. There are certain things that happened during apartheid that, in order for us to know if these things really happened, there's different methodologies that we need to apply in order to get to that truth. We can't take the truth into the lab. Okay? So the scientific method, quote-unquote scientific method, might not be the best way for us to go about determining if a historical event actually happened. But we'll get into that later. So that's the first topic, what is truth? The second topic is, what is God? Now, this is a very important question, and I want us to be clear about the distinction here. We're not asking who is God. Or when I speak to people that from different religions or different belief systems, the debate is always about who is God. And I always tell them, no, we need to start with what is God. So when we ask the question, what is God, we want to know, does God exist firstly? Is there evidence when we look at nature? So at this point, I always tell people, I don't want us to use our religious books at this point. Because what happens is the Muslim, the Jew, the Christian, we have we have different religious books, and we'll start talking from our books, and then we talk past each other. The invitation when we ask the question, what is God, is to go and look at reality as it is, the universe as it is, to try and determine, is there evidence within the universe that God exists? And if there's evidence, what are the attributes that God must have in order for him to be God? Let me share an example. Modern science has found that there's significant evidence to suggest or to reasonably conclude that the universe had a beginning. So from philosophy, we can argue and say that, okay, if the universe has a beginning, then it must have a beginner. It makes sense? And if the universe had a beginner, the entity that began the universe, that created the universe, can't be made up of the stuff that the universe consists of. You understand? The universe consists of time, space, and matter, which means whatever created the universe must be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. But we'll get into that more later. Okay? So under the question, what is God, we want to say, is there sufficient evidence when we observe the universe, when we observe nature, when we observe ourselves to indicate that there is a God? And if there's sufficient evidence, what are the attributes that God must have? That any world system, any religious system, any world view that wants to claim that they serve the only one true God, what are the attributes that their God must have when we compare that God to the universe or to the creator of the universe? What are the attributes that God must have in order for him to be God, or in order for us to consider him as God? So that's the second question is, what is God? The third question we're going to discuss is, who is God? Now that we've determined, we've looked at evidence that there is a God. We've looked at evidence that shows us what are the attributes that God must possess. Now we can ask the question, okay, who is God? And at this point, we will turn to the different world religions to see what their definition of God is. So we'll start with atheism. And yes, I do include atheism as a religion because they conduct themselves as a religion. We start with atheism, which claims there is no God. So we look at the evidences that we can see from nature, from the universe, and see is the atheist's assertion that there is no God, is that consistent with what we see in nature and in the universe? Secondly, we'll look at pantheism. Pantheism states everything is God. You are God, I am God, nature is God, the tree is God, everything is God. Then we look at polytheism. Polytheism says there is a multitude of gods. There's more than one God. And we'll see if that is consistent with what we see in reality as well. And then finally, we'll look at monotheism. Monotheism states there's only one God, one being that's God. Okay. After we've asked the question, who is God? And my argument will be that monotheism provides the best explanation for what we see in nature, what we can extrapolate from nature as to what the attributes of God must be. I think I will argue that monotheism gives the best explanation. Then, if monotheism is the best explanation, there are three major monotheistic religions, and that is Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And at this point, I will turn to the Bible, and I will try and argue for the historical reliability of the Bible. Now, there are some people that usually when I do this, they will object and say, no, but how can you say Christianity is true if you haven't studied all the other religions in the world? And I always tell them, why do you need to study all the other religions in the world? If you can determine that Christianity is true, then every other religion that contradicts Christianity is false. For example, if you can, when you are determining directions, if you can determine what north is, then you don't have to go in search of all the other directions. You will know them automatically because you've determined north. Does it make sense? So that's the approach I'm going to take. I'm going to try and show that the Bible is a reliable historical document. Okay? We're going to look at the historical accuracy of the Bible. We're going to look at the internal consistency, the logical consistency of the Bible. We're going to look at the testimony of Jesus, what Jesus says about the Bible. And then we're going to look at a little bit. We're going to look at personal experience. Okay. Then we're going to take some time to look at the resurrection of Jesus. Now, we might take a couple of episodes to look at the resurrection of Jesus because it's so crucial. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, then Christianity is false. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, if Jesus did not rise, we believe in vain. So we need to spend some time to look at the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Because remember, the resurrection of Jesus is not a matter of faith. It's a matter of historical record. It either happened or it didn't happen. If it happened, then it doesn't matter if we agree with it. It doesn't matter if we believe it. It's a fact. And so we have to deal with it. Okay? So we're going to look at multiple lines of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. That might take a couple of episodes. And then after that, we're going to look at the Trinity. Many people object to Christianity because of the Trinity. How can God be one and three at the same time? And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the three persons of the Trinity individually first. We're going to look at the Father and see, does the Bible describe the Father as having the attributes of God? Does the Bible describe the Son as having the attributes of God? Does the Bible describe the Spirit as having the attributes of God? And then we're going to say, okay, but if all three of these persons are being described as God, but we've determined there can be only one God, there can be only one, then how do you reconcile these realities? That's the question we're going to answer. After that, we're going to look at some more attributes of God as defined by the Bible. And the reason we're going to do this is particularly because what I see with a lot of believers is we don't know who God is and why God does what he does. So when life happens, when things get hard, when circumstances befall us, we turn away from God because the God we have in our mind is not consistent with the God that actually exists. So I have a friend, we like to debate, and then sometimes we make up hypothetical situations. So I would ask him, look, if someone gets raped, for example, did God ordain it or did God allow it? And then he would say, no, God didn't ordain it. God allowed it. Because God doesn't mess with the free will of creatures. So the rapist, God didn't want to interfere with the rapist's choice. Then I said, but what about the choice of the person being raped? What about their choice? Because in his mind, God, all the good things that happens in our lives is God. All the bad things is the devil. And so what we do is, without noticing it, we place the devil and God on the same level. And we elevate the devil to the level of God. But he's also a creature. God is sovereign over the devil, over us, over his creation. And so we want to look at some of the attributes of God to substantiate this claim. Then after that, we're going to look at some of the objections to the existence of God. Then the next episode, we're going to look at the objections to the resurrection of Jesus. And then finally, we're going to look at some objections to the Trinity. And that's basically what we're going to cover throughout the first season of Reasonable Christianity. Okay, I hope you guys are excited to join me on this journey. I hope to hear from you guys, get some feedback from you guys. Please share the podcast with friends and family. You can reach out to me on my social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those things. I would really like to get your feedback about questions. If you feel like I'm not handling a topic correctly, or if I'm not considering all the options or all the arguments, please reach out to me, challenge me. I want to grow in my work with the Lord. And I really do believe that there are no questions that God finds surprising. So we can ask him anything. And I believe that he's willing and able and eager to answer our questions and to meet us where we are. Okay, so until the next time, guys, please remember, the truth matters, and so do you.